Okay, so we're gonna spend 15 more minutes on this activity, and then we'll move on and talk about the solution. How are things going for this one? It's going good. School's going good. Progress.
Well, not till the end, but
Sure. I mean, I try. But then you have to keep track of that variable.
Well, it can be calculated too.
Right.
But
Jake, if the random number is 8, it means it equals to the number of the command line, right? That's what it is. If the random number is 8, it means they equal, right? Why then are we talking about add back a large amount?
so it's not asking you
Like basically the price is the one
Hard coded?
a
Something that's more than this. Anyone, any number that more than this.
it's not asking all that means it's a cost.
So we should make another random, which should be more than this.
And then if
Or
that
you
number
can do hard code. No,
then you go pick
I didn't actually think about that, but I guess you can do like
plus one.
pick the number.
Random number plus one. Make
whatever
it.
you bet. The
Well,
number
what's it
called?
times like times.
So basically you can do anything. I mean, I'm just trying to
Yeah, it's
understand
just
what
gonna
they
be
mean.
a larger one.
So if I change
Even just plus one.
I change back to 10.
You just want to bet plus one. Bet,
That what happens is they are generating
guess
now that's my number. And that word number is one.
Because we've already,
They already have that.
because you'll be assigning it zero.
Now we would have, I tried to do that, it doesn't break.
You'd have to assign it zero.
Like, if you do that,
Which
it comes back to everything. Everything that's that's not the way. It's not, you're not, this way is not giving the person a chance to put their own number. It's generating a number for you, and then comparing it to number one, and the answer is one.
Oh, okay.
So this is totally a useless method. This method is the cheat. Your number is randomized. You pick the random number, right? So that number, you don't pick it yourself. Computer. Right. If you go back to one, you win. Yeah, if you go back to one, you start winning because that number spits out, it just won. One equals one, therefore you win. Change it to one, you see what happens. Don't put anything else. Bottom. Yeah. Right, because you change that
There you go. That's
to
what
one, that after the multiplication sign. So the only answer is one. So the range is one. So your number is one. Change it to two. Yes.
You cannot say
now.
Well, over time,
total and we need to make
you can do
the
it.
variable
Running around.
with the new total that's gonna be less than this.
Just make it a positive. $1 billion. You need a payday loan at 200%.
Basically, we expected that value, it's always been equal to one. But,
Fine.
Let's see. So, okay, so you're not checking parameters, you're just reading directly from that text. You're gonna print the error, and then you're gonna split it.
I see.
Parse forming. Okay, what's the errors that you see?
Can you have an F?
What's the error? Yeah, like,
Second
what
part.
is it that you're seeing as the result? That's incorrect. Okay, so you're on the right path?
Yes,
Wait.
I just made it very good. I'm gonna use it. And then if you win it,
Okay, so we're not seeing it. So let's start from the beginning. Okay. So, like I said, when you want to debug what's going on, let's start console logging. Right now, this console log in the beginning of the this console log.
either way, you're gonna be yeah. Because they don't give you the cost of the ticket back even if you win. Not that you want
Well, we
it
can
back.
still do that. Well, but we can still do it here. We just
Yeah. You're running the withdrawal no matter what.
Okay, so that tells us it's actually not reading this particular file. Aren't you in the wrong location? You're in solve. You want to be unsolved. So let's go to the unsolved location.
Yeah, so you win. I withdrew. Yeah, I withdrew one and then I got. So technically I made 349.
All right. So now we know we're reading the right. Then we see zeros, which is not what we want. So let's console log out. Let's confirm it's split.
Subtracting.
Your
You
console
know
log.
what's happening. This is getting added to
Because now we're what do you expect to see?
Well, I mean, I'll see the
once it's added to the file, it's calculating the number in the back.
Just data. Let's see if I can.
Oh, really?
Okay, cool. Now we see it actually has the numbers that we care about. Now we know that's correct. Let's figure out why it's not here. Now, we've defined total as 0. Where's
I didn't care as much.
something is going on with this that it doesn't look like it's paid. So this console log inside this
But yeah, but later on.
this console log out this entire section. Parse book.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Just to confirm what's going on.
Okay, maybe.
No, no, it's called you can analyze this. Not my problem.
So it didn't even hit that
It's
console.
funny, I was thinking about it after we
You can
talked.
see that there's something pointing to it. That means it's not even hitting that forward. So there's something about its forward that it does not work. And the issue here is that you're not using that. It can't even execute the formula. So now let's try it. Let's see what's going on. Alright, so now we can see that it's going through the for loop, it's printing every single number in the array.
There we go,
And that's it. Yeah, no problem. Whenever in doubt, just console log everything. Everything, all the different places. So you're sure what's going on. Sure.
So I'm adding 25. Right. 25.
Yes, what a coincidence. So we can go.
Okay, so to progress further in class, we're going to take a look at the solution and see what all the individual pieces for the commands we need for this exercise. Let's see. So in the solution, they go about handling the if-else cases a little differently. They're using switch cases. It's subjective. A switch case works perfect here. An if-else case also works perfect here. It's really up to your discretion. But the very first thing that they do is that they have an action command, which will be either deposit, withdraw, total, or lotto. And then they also handle the value that we'll be withdrawing and the value that we'll be depositing using the process argv commands. This should not come as a surprise. This is what we spoke about earlier in the bank base case that I had over here. Instead of using switch cases, I just use simple if-elses. Both work. Now, for the total case, they broke up the logic into individual functions. This is a great example of like having a separation of concerns, organizing your code in a readable fashion. So they're calling each individual function for each individual case. And so for the total function, is going to take advantage of the FS file system library. Is going to read from bank.txt, UTF-8 encoding, error out if there is an error. It's going to split it by its commas and the spaces. And then we're going to loop through that created array by the length, data.length. This is optional, confirming that it's actually a correct float, and then you're just going to add them together. So the result would be plus equals parse float the data inside the array, which would be the individual numbers. And then we're just going to console log that out. They have also added another helpful function called toFixed. You would have noticed that when you guys were handling the total function that the number had a whole bunch of different decimals. toFixed is what kind of shortens that down to a number that we're usually familiar with when it comes to currency, which is just 2 decimal places. So don't fret if you didn't get a chance to knock this out. This is just a helper function to make things look more pretty. Questions on total? Cool. So now when it comes to deposit, as I gave you a hint earlier, we want to append to the bank.txt. So for this particular example, we're going to append the value, that is the second argument that we're passing in, that value over here, to the bank.txt file. So we're going to do fs, use the append file function to the bank.txt. We're going to add a comma and a space because that's what all the different values are defined as in that bank.txt file. Is going to be the value preceded by a comma and a space. There we go. Bank.js. So for deposit, we're going to add a comma and a space plus the value that we passed in as an argument. And that's pretty much it. Then we're just going to console log out the deposit value. The exact same code for withdraw, except we're going to add a minus sign just to signify that this is a negative value that we're adding to bank.txt. Questions on deposit and withdraw? Cool. So now let's talk about Lotto, which is a little bit more interesting. For this particular implementation, they've decided to subtract 25 cents every time the Lotto call is made. So once again, we'll use the exact same format that we're using for withdraw. Technically, we could have even reused the withdraw function and passed in a parameter value over here and just reuse that logic over and over again if you wanted to be slick about it. But sometimes it's best to write things out in a very verbose manner so that you understand what's going on. So we are appending to that bank text file negative 25 cents. Is a static value because we're saying every time I buy a lotto ticket, we're going to minus 25 cents regardless. Exact same code that you see for withdraw. Then we're going to grab a random number using the math function, math.random. I believe this is up to multiply by 10. I don't know. Let's actually execute just this piece of code and see what that does. Sure, but just for teaching purposes. Let's go to Sublime random JS. All right, if we just have this value, console.log. Whenever in doubt and you need to understand what things are doing, just console log it out. That's how you debug. Node random.js. And it's just going to keep on giving us random values up to 10. That's all that does. And so the way this works, we're saying if that random number happens to equal to 1, then they've won the lotto. So when they've won the lotto, we want to deposit $2 to their account. So once again, we could have reused the deposit function, but we're just going to, for verbosity's sake, we're going to append to the bank.txt, comma, space 2. That's the $2 they won. Congrats, you won the lotto. Else, sorry, you just lost 25 cents. That's it. questions on Lotto?
It's not, we just didn't understand the concept.
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean,
We've been doing different ways.
yeah, there's many different ways to tackle this particular problem.
I implemented it so you can actually bet. You can actually bet on that, not
Yes, so that's another implementation. You could choose your Lotto number.
yeah. So I made the price to be like 10 times when you bet.
Okay. Yeah, so that's another great implementation. This one was just a fun topic, which is very subjective for you to figure out how you want to handle it. So take a look at the solution. If some of these pieces look foreign to you, try to understand how withdraw and deposit can be reused within Lotto. And yeah, that's it for that. Moving on, we want to talk a little bit about a function called Axios. So Axios is a brand new library that we're going to learn about. And I want you guys to understand that Axio is kind of like Node's Ajax. This is how we're able to make HTTP requests. So let's look at what Axios is all about. Google Node Axios.
When you say Node Ajax, you can still use jQuery in Node, right or not?
Nope.
That's just
No
a front-
jQuery in Node. That's all front-end JavaScript. Yep.
But you could use like the XML HTTP request.
Yes. But if you have some HTML, yeah, sure. I'm just trying to provide a comparison because you guys have used Ajax in your previous projects, and you can think of that jQuery GET request is the same way we're doing that, but in Node using Axios. So let's take a look at let's look at the GitHub documentation. What does GitHub have to say? Blah, 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 browser support, blah, 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 blah. So it tells us the way to install this library is by using npm install Axios. This is important because it signifies that this is not default with Node. We were using the file system library and we didn't have to npm install anything. npm install is a way of using an external library. We're using a, let's go to npm.com. Let's get the actual name, the full definition of npm. Whoops, not NASDAQ. I don't care about that. Whoops. There we go, npmjs.com. It's a package manager for JavaScript programming libraries. That would be npmjs.com. Feel free to follow along on your own browsers. What this means is that this is a online CDN of sorts, which stores all the libraries that you can now install to your local Node projects that other developers have built. You guys might remember from Bootstrap, when you didn't want to download and store the Bootstrap JS and CSS in your local computers, you could just use a CDN URL. You could think of this as a CDN for JavaScript libraries. It's always readily available for the most part, that if you do an npm install whatever, you can now install those libraries to your local computer. So yeah, they have a whole bunch of different types of libraries, and if we look up Axios, am I spelling it right? There we go. This was created by some guy at some point, and you would now install it from this repository because this is what people use to store all these different type of open source libraries. They would upload it here, and then you would just download it from here. Most languages have their own type of library storage functionality. With Python, it's PyPy. With Java has its own. I can't remember off the top of my head what that is, but most languages have their own type of library repository, and this is just JavaScript and Node's way of handling that. It's a very popular library. As you can see, weekly downloads are in the millions, and it has the exact same documentation that the GitHub has. If you want to use this, you would use npm install Axios, and they have different examples over here. A simple GET request would be axios.get, and then it would use this URL. This slash signifies that you're using localhost. So this would be localhost/user ID 12345, or just get localhost/user. And then you can pass in params if you want, like so, or you can pass in the params directly in the string. You would use .then to then handle the response that you get from that website, whether you're console logging out that response or doing some other fancy logic, and then you would catch any error that occurs as that request is being made. So those are really the main functions for Axios. You would have a get, which you would pass in the URL that you want to make your get request to. You would add a then, which would include a callback with the parameter response, which would be the response from that get request. And then, as always, you need to catch any errors because you want to know if there's an error during a request. So if we take a look at the example that we have over here, this example is importing the Axios library, which is require Axios. We're attaching it to a variable. Let's make this a constant. And then we're using Axios get, the URL that we want to get, which is Wikipedia, kudos, granola bar. Then we have a callback function, which takes in parameter response. And this will be the response information that we get from Wikipedia. So within the response object, there's a key called data, and that's what we actually want to access. I will add an additional console log over here just to show you guys the entire object itself and what you can play around with. What else? And then within that function, we're also passing in another function which contains the parameter error, and it handles different errors. Like if there's an error response, we're going to print out the data, the status, the headers. Else, if there was a request made but no response, then it does this other logic. Else, it just prints out a generic error if anything happens. You'll notice the syntax is a little different from what the NPM website recommended. So I'm going to put them side by side to show you the differences and also to explain that they do the exact same thing. So in this case, we have Axios get, and we're using the then function and passing in this case, two parameters. One is a callback for the response, and the second parameter is a callback for the error. In the example we see in NPM, for the then function, they are only passing in the response callback. And then they're doing a .catch to handle all of the errors. They both do the exact same thing. Don't be confused by that. Two different ways to do the exact same thing. Just kind of depends. What do you guys determine? What do you guys think is more readable? I mean, granted, sure, it signifies that it's catching an error and then it's doing some work with it. So it's really up to your own discretion. So now let's go to the terminal and see what this does. So let's go back again, ls 16 Axios. All right, let's go to that first one, ls clear. So when I try to run this, I'm hoping to expect that it prints out the response object and the response data for this Wikipedia URL. Let's see what happens. Error. It's going to be pretty verbose in the errors. It's going to tell you it cannot find the module Axios. Why can it not find the module Axios? Yes, we do not have this library currently installed. We're importing this library, but we have not actually gone about installing it to our local computers. This is not, as I mentioned earlier, this is not a pre-built library that comes with Node for free. You need to say, I want to use this library, I want to bring this library into my ecosystem. So the command for that, as we saw in npm.js, is npm install Axios. So let's do that. It's clear. npm install Axios. we'll let that go. Okay, let's see. So it added 4 packages, found 146 vulnerabilities, wonderful, and then run npm audit fix to fix them all. I don't care about that right now. I'll just know that my code is insecure. So now we've installed Axios. What do we expect to see? ls. Okay. We'll touch on that later. Okay, so now I'm hoping that when I run node axios.js, it should just run fine. So let's see what happens. All right, so now we know we have installed npm Axios, and then this is the entire response from Wikipedia that I got, which is the raw HTML from the GET request. Now, I want to show you the response object. Okay, let's remove this or console, or yeah, let's comment that out. I just want to print the response. Let's hit clear. Run node, Axios, perfect. So now let me scroll to the beginning. As you can see, it's a lot of data. But you see, this is the beginning of the object. The beginning of the object is just a typical JavaScript object that we have seen time and time again. It has a key called status, which tells us this is a 200 status. Everything went successful with this request. Status text is okay. These are all the headers related to this request. And then we have a configuration object, should you so feel the need to take a look at this configuration object. But the meat of this request that we really care about is the data key. And that is probably all the way down here somewhere. Maybe let's see if we can find it. Data. Oh, there we go. The data that we actually care about begins right here at this data key. So this would be response.data, and it just prints out the raw HTML that we're getting from Wikipedia. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure everybody understands that the response object itself will contain the information that you care about, but it will also come with a whole bunch of other information that you might care about in the future. So, I want to know where we go from here. I want to also talk a little bit about package.json. Package.json is a file that you'll typically see in a lot of node projects. Package.json you could think of as the project description file. This is going to give you the name of the project, is going to give you the name of the author of the project, is going to give you a name of all the libraries you need to run that project. So that is created by using npm init. So for this specific project, it's just going to use, by default, it uses the folder name, and this folder is called one missing package. I'm okay with that. I'm just going to click enter. Let's call it 1.000. I'm okay with that. Description, Axios example. Entry point, that means like which script is actually being run to execute this application. That's going to be axios.js. I'm fine with that. The test command, I don't need to put that in right now. Git repository, don't have one. Keywords, don't care. Author, me. License, whatever. And it's going to print out, it's going to create a package.json file that has this by default, which will have the name, the version, descriptions, the main script being run. Says no test was defined for scripts, that's fine. Author, me, license, ISC. Okay, yes. So when I do ls, I'll see my package.json file, which has all that information. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if I didn't want to go through lines and lines of code to understand what libraries I need, to know that, oh, okay, they're requiring and importing Axios, I should probably npm install Axios. Sometimes it's not that easy to understand what libraries are required. So people will input the libraries they need within their package.json files. And there's a handy way to do that, which I'm going to Google right now. I believe if I want to npm install and add to package.json, let's take a look at this. Syntax, blah, 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 save to prod, save to dev, or just save in general. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's try save to dev. So if I'm installing a library that I'm using while I'm deving, while I'm creating this file, let's just use -- save. Let's do npm axios install -save, and let's see if it added to the package.json. There we go. You see that it created a dependencies key that says we're using the library Axios, and this is the version of Axios we're using, which seems to be the latest version, 0.18. Let's confirm. Is that actually the latest version? It is. The latest version of npm is 0.18. So now, if I was a new developer pulling down your code and I need to install the libraries that I care about, I wouldn't need to do npm install Axios anymore. All I would do is just npm install. And that automatically reads from the package.json file and reads all the dependencies that I need for this project to work, and it will install it. So, as you can see, I've already installed Axios, but let me uninstall it so you can install it again, just to show you. I misspelled that. Axios. Alright, so let's clear that. If I just do npm install, there's npm list. Missing package empty. Let's see. Let's confirm and test. npm uninstall Axios. I keep misspelling it. Alright, now let's run this. What is the uninstall command? npm uninstall package. Let's see how we remove something completely. Blah, 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 blah. Let's add that global command, because I believe it's installed globally. npm uninstall -g Axios. Up to date. I don't care about that. Well, I figured that out later. Okay, but I want you guys to understand that fact that your package.json, when you do install it with the -save flag, it'll prepend that to your package.json so you know what libraries you need. So if we take another look at examples for Axios, in this simple example in number 17, we're requiring the Axios library. This exercise already comes with a package.json. In its package.json, you'll see that it has dependency for Axios. The main script is at omdb axios.js. Same thing with the versions 1.0, blah, blah, blah. So all I have to do when I'm inside this folder is npm install. And then when we take a look at the actual file and the work that it's doing, it has an Axios command for get. We're passing in the request for OMDB API. We're looking for the film Remember the Titans. And then there's a whole bunch of other request parameters. We have a .then function, which takes in a function for the response. Notice that we don't care about errors in this particular example. Once again, that's very subjective. You should always care about errors, but for simplicity, we're not in this case. For function response, we're going to console log out the response data and the IMDb rating. So when I go to that location in my file system, it's ls, that should be 17, node omdb axios. It's going to tell me that this moving's rating is 7.8 because it took the entire response object, it went to the data portion that we actually care about, and within the data portion, there's a key called IMDb rating, and that's what it actually printed out. It's going to be printing out just the rating that we care about. Once again, when you're in doubt, always console log out. That will tell you all the options you have available to you from that response object. If I run this again, you'll see that instead of like with Wikipedia, it gave us the raw HTML. This API is smart enough to return to me a JavaScript object, which has multiple keys, the title, remember the Titans, the year, the rating, the when it was released, and all this additional information that you can play around with within your code to do whatever it is you want. Question?
So you can control what information it gives you, because you were saying something a few minutes ago about how you get information that you care about, something that you may care about later.
Yes, that's all in the response object.
Okay, so by putting that response in there, you can determine what information you get back.
No.
So you don't have to get all of that.
So the response is whatever the URL that you're hitting wants to give you.
Okay.
So you'll notice that when we hit the Wikipedia example, and I'm going to actually go there again and have them sitting side by side. When we did node Axios, whoops, wait a minute. CD, okay. Node Axios.js. You see all this extra stuff that it gave us? This is the raw HTML. This is what Wikipedia has opted to give us in this particular scenario. It's different with OMDB API because they're giving us just a JavaScript object with just the details we care about, not all of the HTML tags and all that other noise that you don't care about.
So it depends on the URL.
It all depends on the URL, what they want to give you.
So like now we're running this on our local.
Yes.
Local machine. What differences can we expect, like if we're running it on a server? Like I know that Heroku asks for you to like specify a build pack when you're pushing to Heroku.
Yes.
And it'll look at your package JSON, read the dependencies, and probably sort stuff out.
Correct.
But I guess like if you're starting with something that's not Heroku, just maybe just a blank machine.
Yes.
What is the I guess what I'm getting at is like what is the build pack actually do?
Yeah, so Heroku is nice because it automates a lot of things for you, so you don't have to think about it. But that can also, as a new developer, that can be detrimental to yourself because there's a lot of steps that you're missing. So when you push to Heroku, it's going to use a node build pack. And the node build pack is going to automatically look for a package.json file. And within that package.json file, is going to expect that you have a list of dependencies that you care about to execute your application successfully. It's going to look at your package.json, is going to see, oh, I require Axios, is going to npm install Axios, and then it's going to execute the main script within your package.json. It's going to execute omdb axios.js by calling node omdb axios.js. All of this is done automatically and magically on the back end. If you're depositing to a blank server, like not Heroku, like a very generic virtual machine, you need to have a script that does all that stuff. You need to have a script that calls npm install. First of all, pulls down your code, maybe it's sitting on GitHub, git clones down your code, CDs into the correct folder location, runs npm install, then runs node omdb axios.js. You need to manually build out all those steps.
Okay, what scripting language? Like, do we use JS for that?
So all depends on what machine you're installing to. If the machine you're installing to has Node already pre-built, then that could just be a Node script that does that. Most of them understand basic bash scripts, and bash script would just be terminal commands. So you would just have a list of terminal commands in your bash script that you would just execute, and that runs on most VMs. Sure. So yeah, any questions on what we've just seen? Yeah, sure. So first of all, to create your package.json, you would do npm init, and then to install a dependency, you would do npm install dependency name. With the optional save flag in case you want to save it to your package.js, package.json. But here's something that I noticed, which I don't know, I haven't played around with Node in a while. Let's go back to 16. Mission package. When I ls this, you'll notice that there's a Node modules here. Where did this folder come from? What this means is that whenever there's a node modules, I'm assuming it gets created because now there's a package.json that exists. If there's a package.json that exists, when you npm install, it will assume this is a local dependency specific to this project at hand. That's what it's assuming. If there is no package.json, it's going to install it to your global node executable, which will be used for all projects. So whenever you see a node modules, that'll tell you that this Axios and all these other libraries, this is local and specific to this project that I'm working on at that time. But I want to test that, so let's go and run a few commands just so that everything is clear. So when I do ls, I'm going to remove my package.json. I'm going to remove my package lock. Package lock is an auto-generated file. When you npm install, you don't have to worry too much about it. This is just it. It's kind of like saying, you could just think of it as an auto-generated file that goes along with package.json. You don't need to touch it. It's auto-generated for you. Let it do its thing. So let's remove that as well. Blah blah blah. All right. ls, let's remove our node modules. Okay, so I have a default Axios.js file. When I npm install Axios, and I do an ls, you'll notice it did not create a node modules folder. That's because it's installing it to my global node executable, which will work on all projects. That's not actually what I need or care about. So I am going to npm uninstall globally Axios. Okay. What I needed to do is save it locally. Now, what I did previously was use npm init to create a package.json. Let's see what happens if I just do install Axios and save without a package.json. Nothing. It doesn't save to anything because that file does not exist. Once again, I'm going to uninstall this because it's installed globally. Now clear everything, npm init. Let's create that package.json. Package name, that's fine. Description, whatever. Entry point, blah, 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 blah. Keywords, don't care. This is the file it's going to create. So now we see it as a package.json. Just to ls one more time so you guys can see. Package.json signifies that for this specific project, this has all of the information it needs to execute it. It knows which script it needs to run by the main, it has the author, and now it's going to have a dependency because I'm going to pip install Axios save. Say this is a library that is needed locally for the specific project. When I do ls, you'll notice node modules has not been created. There's a package lock.json that's been auto-generated. When I do npm list, is going to tell me for this project, one missing package, which is at version 1.0. There's a library called Axios that I care about, and that's kind of how all this stuff correlates. I'm then going to cat package.json. You see in the dependencies, Axios exists. Definitely rewatch this portion of the video when I post it. I know I'm kind of going a little quick because of time, but I need you to understand the differences between a project that has a package.json, one that doesn't have a package.json, and how to install and uninstall dependencies. This is very important.
Real quick, if you do the -- save, that saves it locally to the project?
That saves it to your package.json.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by default, it doesn't install it globally, it installs it locally.
By default, if you don't have a package.json, it will install it globally. If you have a package.json, it will install it locally.
Okay, and typically, let's say if you're working with multiple, I'm assuming you save the packages locally because
yes, you want to make sure each project has its own set of dependencies because sometimes. Yeah, and also you can sometimes get in the habit where you have, like, for example, Axios installed globally, and it happens to work just out the box for all your projects, and you forget to put in your package.json. When you deploy that to Heroku, it won't see Axios, and then everything will break because you didn't have that local dependency.
So is it safe to say that you want
Correct. I would say by convention, everyone always has a package.json.
And then you do the install ACLs.
Correct. Well, then you would just do an npm install.
Well, an npm install.
Yeah, because your package.json already has defined the dependencies. Cool. Any other questions? So I just want to reiterate this number 17 because it's going to be part of the exercise we're working on next. Within that exercise, let's see, what do we provide you? Okay.
So can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
The purpose of the activity 16 was to learn how to create the package JSON? Is that
Correct.
What that was?
Yes. Yeah, because you'll notice that in number 1 is missing a package, but with number 2 it has a package.json. Just a reminder, Axios, you need to require and import the libraries that you care about. The usage will be axios.get, the URL that you want to get, and then we're going to extend that function with a .then, and that .then has a callback for a function which takes in the parameter response. Response is going to be the response from your external provider. And in this case, it's going to be OMDB API, which is a really nice API because it doesn't give you just raw HTML. It gives you all the individual pieces of information you need in a JavaScript object. It's going to console log out. You can console log out that response.data and see what options you have to console log out later on. So let's tackle exercise 18. This will give you a chance to practice using npm init and also being able to add and install dependencies. Let's see. And feel free to do this as partners. So just a reminder, what we give you is a file called OMDB Interactive Starter. What this does is that it's creating a variable called movie name. We give you the query URL, so you don't have to worry about what is the query URL I care about for OMDB. And then we're just going to console log out that query URL. What you need to do is import Axios, install Axios, create a package.json, and then execute a function, execute the query URL in the very same way that we did number 17. So definitely feel free to copy and paste this as a baseline and then edit going forward. So yeah, we'll do this for the next, until 1:50, 1:55, and then we'll talk about the solution, and that should be the end of class.
From activity 16, because I give like instruction what actually you have to do on the file.
No,
Because
that's what
that's the part that we had to kind of memorize. I felt like it was
Yeah, we started running out of time, so I'm sorry to have to start speeding through. But if you look in the Saturday class, Slack group, I select that command right above to create a package.json. You can use npm init, and then to install the dependency.
So those are the only two things that we need for the purpose of.
That's all you care about, and if anything, I'll flesh it out a little bit. Let me do that right now.